Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I look at the 1995-96 Topps basketball card set. This was an awkward year because this was just 1 year before they started the Topps Chrome release and 1 year after they finished doing their Topps Gold parallels. This 1995 card set is interesting in that it has no parallels. Well, for the most part, it has no set-wide parallel. And it's, I believe, the only time in the 90s and on time of Topps in basketball where they had no parallel at all. Or I should say they did not do a parallel for the set. And part of what's interesting about that is that over in football, they had two new franchises. They had the Carolina Panthers and the Jacksonville Jaguars. And they actually released complete sets with the stamps of either of those teams on them. So that meant that all of the 1995 Topps football card sets came as a regular card, but they also came with either these, with two different versions as well, which is from the complete set of the Panthers and the complete set of the Jaguars. In basketball, they also had two new franchises. They had the Toronto Raptors and they had the Vancouver Grizzlies, but they didn't bother to do special commemorative sets. So that means that for this card set, this is a pretty basic card set. I mean, even with subsets, very basic. But at least they made up for it with inserts, which it was about time because Topps was getting kind of long on the tooth in this whole insert thing. And 1994 was a good step forward, but 95 was when they jumped full in. And again, they did so with the deliberate move away from doing parallels for their release, even though they get right back into parallels in 1996. But the card itself for 1995 is very unusual even for Topps, where they went very, very bold pop art. The border is white, but inside they have floating gold foil text at an angle with a box, and inside the box is the first letter of the player's last name that's in a different color. This looks like a Stadium Club card trapped within a Topps border. That's the way that it comes across. An unusual move for Topps, but for this 1995 card set is a very distinctive look. Now, I did say that there were not set-wide parallels, but you already heard me stumbling over the whole thing about parallels in general, which is the fact that they had a partial parallel set for the set called Boosters. And the Boosters cards is for Series 2, just some of the players in the card set. They have a very thick version of it where the background, it's full bleed, but the background is completely covered by a grid of holofoil with a kind of a fan effect. So the card, the way the whole card comes across is very bold. You can just see the background ghosted in behind, but other than that, this is all about the flash of the effect. Though I do have to admit that the card back, while I'm a big fan of the card backs in general, here with the full bleed, the card's backs look so much better. So this is the way that the parallel for the set works. But again, this is the Series 2 parallel. In Series 1, they do have a subset that kicks off the whole set, which is League Leaders. These cards are very cumbersome and they're very busy. The cards have, stripped down at the bottom. They have a logo. They have a big logo in the background, behind the player, covering the background. A lot going on. It's all about making a statement about, look at these cards, the player did something special, even though you can't see the player on the card for the most part. But for Series 1, the booster card set is this entire set of League Leaders. So every one of these cards has a booster equivalent, which has, in this case, not quite a raindrop type of an effect, but something kind of similar where it's a bunch of narrow boxes with a linear path of the effect. And I will note that the booster cards, as you may have already noticed, all of these cards are not individually set numbered in a unique way. They're the regular card numbers from the set. They just happen to have the effect on the card. So in Series 1, it doesn't matter because you're starting with card 1 and moving your way forward, so those numbers work. The cards in Series 2, however, the ones with the fans behind, the random players, those cards are all essentially skip numbered, where there are the regular card numbers from the set wherever those happen to be. There's no renumbering, and there's no special guide. So you got to know what the checklist is of all those cards if you're pursuing them. But the League Leaders wasn't the only subset that they had, or in a way it kind of was, because they did also have the cards for the new expansion team. They had the expansion draft players for both the Toronto Raptors and for the Vancouver Grizzlies. These cards are done in such a wonderful way where you really do get the rich, they take advantage of the rich textures that you can design into a card by making these really fancy special cards designed around the theme in a way of the text for the expansion teams. Gorgeous cards the way they look. That's also the only other thing that they did in this release. So that was it. They had League Leaders, they had veteran cards, and they had expansion draft players. I mean, they did have rookies, but the rookies were not flagged in any way. They were just there. So that brings the set to a close. Now, as I head into the inserts, I've got to note something very significant about this, which is that they did a lot of different things with inserts, and there are a lot of them. And so I've actually grouped them not alphabetically, which I normally do. Instead, I've grouped them into the particular type of finish that the cards have, the approach that they had to make it. And it starts off with the Mystery Finest cards, which, no shock at all, these are finest technology. Although the cards are a little bit more like the Topps Chrome cards we were about to see in terms of the construction. But these cards are special all about the mystery component, which is that in Finest, when they used a protector, you could see through the protector, so you didn't have to take it off. The card looked fine. But for the Mystery Finest cards, what they did was they put an opaque surface over it, so you had to remove the top in order to see who the player was. Now the card back is designed as an all-purpose. So there are a couple of different players who relate to this particular card, and you don't know which of the players is on the front. So on the back, every one of the players, every one of their cards has all four of these players listed on it. But the reason for pulling it off wasn't just to find out who the player was, it was also to find out if it was a refractor. Because these also came with the refractors, and normally with Finest you get like an R or refractor text on the back. Here, they don't do that. Here the card back is benign. It's the same for everything, so you don't know who it is, and you don't know which of the two cards you're going to have on your particular card. So there's an interactive quality to it that's really pretty fun. And speaking of which, they also did I believe this is a very groundbreaking card where they did basically their draft pick redemption cards, which a draft pick redemption or a draft redemption card is nothing new. Fleer had already been doing that, where they would put out a draft redemption card, you send it in, you get the full set of the lottery pick winners. Well, Topps wanted to adjust that and upgrade it, so here they made a card set of 29 cards where in random packs you would get one of the 29 cards. On the front there's a number, and that particular number is the draft pick number pertaining to that card. You send it in, and you get back a draft pick rookie insert card for that particular player. These cards have a whole chromed finish over the surface, which is pretty overpowering. It's difficult to really make these cards work. This one works well enough because the design inside has a really great quality that allows you to really spend the time and enjoy the way the card works. Although I will have to say, I love the card back, the way those come across. But that means that every single player in the first round of the draft pick has in the first round of the draft has two different cards here. They have the redemption card, the unredeemed one, and then they also have the prize card, the draft pick card. So everyone has the two. They also, since we're already on the theme of chromed cards, they also had a card set called Rattle and Roll. And Rattle and Roll is a card that really it plays around with this in a great way, because it has kind of the background is kind of an oil and water swirl like effect, which makes this card very playful and the kind of card that stands out really well to kids. It is a very distinct card, even though it's not the most unusual card you've ever seen, but for this set it is very distinct. They also did a set called Spark Plugs where they did a phenomenal job with the technology where these cards read extremely well. Most of the card is the backdrop color, which is a purple that reads in a way that cuts through the chrome finish. And then they also have some light design work where they have the spark plug, and then they have lightning bolts, which actually reminds me of the classic high voltage cards. Every time I look at it, that's really what I'm thinking about. And then they have the sudden impact cards, and here it's also a chromed surface. They've rotated it to a horizontal position. Again, very strong colors. The themes are a little bit more busy on this card, but it still works really well, primarily because the horizontal orientation is something that is very distinct during this time, especially with a card set like this. But that's not the only way to do a chrome finish on a card, because in 1994 they did a parallel where the cards had a chromed finish on the inside over the background. And that's what they did here. That's exactly what they did, where these cards have a normal border around the outside of the card, but inside, all of that is chromed. So like here with the Foreign Legion cards, they have a gold burnish to the chrome that is, it's a little bit much. It makes it difficult to read what's going on inside, and they do have part of the background on the inside, which is kind of rare with these cards. But other than that, this is a card that is all about the idea of, well, it works well in terms of the gold burnish. That is the one part of the card that does read really well. And then they did their set called Goldmine, and Goldmine is using the same effect as we just saw. Here it has almost a bronze finish to it, which makes it read a lot better because it's not as forward and it's not as dominant. I do have to say, having grown up in gold country, that this is not the way that a mine shaft normally looks, but you don't have a lot of real estate, so I'm going to let them off the hook for it. But at any rate, this is a card that reads a lot better. It works better with the technology. And it's kind of similar with the Showstopper cards, where in this case, I think they mastered it. These are cards that the design works really well in a well-balanced fashion, where they have kind of a spotlight with the shadows behind, but the shadows have a softness to them, and then the text is kind of, it's not ghosted in there, but it's very subtle in it. And so the card itself kind of pulls you in and gives you a very subdued feeling, very relaxed feeling, and really gets you curious to kind of explore around the card and see what's going on with these cards. This is the insert set of all of these insert sets that I look at and I just go, that is so cool, I want to make sure I have the complete set. That's what this particular card is. Now, they didn't just do special effects. They also had two insert sets that were just normal cards with some gold foil. The first one of these is the Top Flight. And Top Flight is a series of cards where they have, so I think it's like F4s behind. I don't know what kind of jet, but the jet does make it kind of difficult to see the player on the inside. In reality, this whole card set is really about the gold foil down at the bottom with a cool etching effect, the way that all of the text comes through. It is really strong. It's also kind of clunky, so this is one of those insert sets that you're normally just kind of going to gloss over, or like in my case, you're going to get the thing done as quickly as you can, and then you're going to move on with your life. Now, World Class is very different because here, horizontal card, again, the orientation, rich colors on this card, but the player stands out a bit more. Not a lot more, but the player does stand out a bit more, but the way that the card works makes this probably the best fully crafted card of them all. And it's such a big help that they don't have any chroming on the card, which allows the card to read the way it's supposed to read. But it's easy to talk about a card that's simplified to the point where it is a perfect read for collectors. But what about the flip side? And the last insert set is WizKids, which does exactly that. It is so overpowering, and that's what makes it work well. This is a card set of young players, so these are players who are already getting us really excited. But the way the card is designed is built around a cutout of the player, and then the whole background is holofoil with bunch of streaks in it, and then they do have an inner frame for the player, which is a key, some X's and O's, and the card on the card back, it has the key itself is the whole theme of the design with, in this case, it's a print interpretation of the holofoil on the card front. That's what I'm going to say. But otherwise, a very bold card. And that's everything to talk about for the packs of 1995-96 Topps basketball. But there is one other thing to mention, which is that Kellogg's worked out a deal to make Damon Stoudemire cards. Kellogg's was really excited in the Toronto Raptors. And so they did make a reprint set of the Toronto Raptors cards from the set, which includes Damon Stoudemire. But these cards were done with a silver foil instead of a gold foil. So that's the main way that it's different. But they also have the logo for the team, or inaugural team logo on the cards. So that is also a difference on these cards. But they did do that as a special release in Canada for Toronto, but not for Vancouver. But do understand, if you run into one of these cards and it has silver on it, that's a Kellogg's card of Damon Stoudemire. So that is what I've got to say about 95-96 Topps. They were now starting to get really complex with all of the things that they were doing, trying to really get this whole mid to late 90s thing down. And they were doing a pretty good job, although they would have to get into parallels. But again, 1996, they would really get into parallels. So that brings this to a close. I've already done all of the Topps basketball cards leading up to this. So if you haven't seen those videos, do check them out. If you haven't subscribed, I urge you to do so. And thank you very much for watching.